The office fell silent, a silence so sharp, it felt like it could cut skin. The CEO leaned over the marble desk, blue suit stretched tight, eyes locked on an 11-year-old boy in a Pikachu shirt. Malik didn't blink. He didn't step back. He just listened to the faint clicking inside the frozen machine. Beside him, his mother Ava, still in her maid uniform, gloves on, placed a protective hand on his shoulder. Behind them, a wall of executives stared like statues. Then the CEO's voice sliced the room. "Fix this, and I'll give you my mansion." A cruel smirk. Cameras recording. Employees whispering. "And if you fail," he added, leaning closer, "you both walk out of this building forever." Malik finally exhaled. "Then let me listen." Sterling Capitol Tower wasn't just a building. It was a monument to power. 43 floors of glass, steel, and fear. Up on the robotics floor, the air itself felt tense. A prototype engine, silver, sleek and worth millions, sat dead on the central desk, its monitor flashing a blood-red warning. "System failure. Launch canceled executives," whispered behind polished shoes and expensive watches. 3 cities were waiting for this machine. 12 product lines depended on its success, and nearly $80 million in penalties loomed if it didn't work by tonight. The CEO, Blake Sterling, thrived on this chaos. Humiliation was his hobby. He fired people like he deleted emails, quickly and without looking twice. Ava, Malik's mother, stood small in her maid uniform, among suits worth more than her yearly salary. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to speak, and she definitely wasn't supposed to challenge, the CEO. One HR officer whispered. "Isn't that the cleaner who's already on her last warning?" Another added, "He's using this to get rid of her. Watch!" But Malik didn't hear them. He heard something else, a tiny rhythmic clicking from inside the engine, like a heartbeat out of sync, and he stepped closer. The engine sputtered, then died at 14 minutes and 37 seconds, exactly like every failed attempt before it. Engineers shook their heads. "Software glitch," one muttered. "Hopeless," said another. Behind them, CEO Blake whispered to HR, "Blacklist the Maid. If the kid embarrasses me, they're both gone." Ava's breath trembled. Malik didn't flinch. He leaned in and heard a faint, cyclical rattle no one else noticed. The moment Malik reached for the engine, a sharp voice cut through the room. "Step away from that machine!" Vivian Cortez, the CTO, strode forward in a tailored Navy suit, eyes cold behind thin metal frames. "This is a controlled environment. Children don't touch company prototypes." 2 engineers formed a wall in front of Malik, arms crossed, protecting the machine as if he were a threat. A compliance officer jabbed a finger at Ava. "You're already on your final warning. 1 more violation, and we terminate your contract immediately." Ava pulled Malik back, voice shaking. "We're leaving." "This isn't safe." Security stepped in instantly. "Ma'am, you can leave." The boy stays until the CEO dismisses him. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Then a calm, accented voice rose from the back. "Let him listen. 10 minutes only." The German vendor representative stepped forward, adjusting his glasses. "We've tested everything except fresh perspective," Vivian bristled. "This is absurd," but the CEO lifted a hand. "Let the boy embarrass himself." Malik looked up at his mother, nodded softly. Then he whispered, "I just need silence." And a paperclip. The room fell into an uneasy hush as Malik stepped closer. He pulled a paperclip from his pocket, straightened it, and gently placed its tip against the engine's outer casing. A tiny vibration traveled up the metal, into the clip, then into Malik's fingers. He closed his eyes. Tap, 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 tap. A rhythm. Wrong, uneven, almost struggling to breathe. He traced each vibration against the engine's diagnostic screen, matching the spikes with uncanny precision. A senior engineer frowned. "What is he doing?" Malik didn't answer. He pointed at a small engraving on the motor housing, 6.3mm metric then, He pointed at the software display blinking on a nearby tablet, 450 in. Imperial, he looked up. Your math thinks in inches, but this machine breathes in millimeters. Malik's hands didn't shake. Grandpa had trained them. In a tiny Detroit garage, he'd learned that engines have heartbeats, that every machine sings if you know how to listen. He once tuned Lego gearboxes to match radio songs. And now, that same gift whispered the engine's true rhythm. Ava signed the waiver with trembling fingers. If Malik touched the machine, she bore the blame. Termination. Blacklisting. No second chances. CFO whispered to HR. If he fails, janitorial cuts begin tonight. Malik stepped forward. Anyway, a soft smile touched his face. Won't fail at listening, he said, and the room went still. The robotics floor transformed in seconds. Phones rose. Cameras clicked. Engineers whispered as if a scandal was about to unfold, because it was. Blake Sterling, the CEO, paced to the center of the room like a showman stepping onto a stage built for humiliation. He straightened his designer suit, smirked at Ava, then tapped the microphone on the table. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, voice booming through ceiling speakers, our prodigy believes he can fix what 3 engineering teams, 2 consultants, and 6 weeks of diagnostics could not. A murmur spread. People pressed closer. Blake lifted a hand dramatically. So, let's make this educational. He pointed at Malik. You want to touch my multi-million-dollar prototype? A beat. Then you fix it. Under supervision, under pressure, and under a very generous clock. Vivian, the CTO, blinked. Sir, this is irresponsible. Quiet, Blake snapped. If the kid fails, it proves my point. If he succeeds, he chuckled. Well, he won't. To the crowd, it was entertainment. To Ava, it was terror. To Malik, it was a puzzle begging to be understood. Lights brightened as media equipment rolled in. Marketing staff scrambled, setting up the company's official live stream. Within minutes, comments poured in. Mansion, bet, CEO's kid, impossible fix. Blake loved every second. Before we begin, he said, pacing slowly, I want complete transparency. He turned to his engineers. If any of you assist him without permission, you're suspended. Gasps. If any of you block him, you're terminated. More gasps. And if he succeeds, Blake added with poisonous amusement, the engineer who didn't think of the solution will write a formal apology. On camera, Vivian swallowed hard. Dozens of eyes turned to her. Malik stepped forward unbothered. He didn't need their help. He didn't need their permission. He needed silence. And tools. Can I have a whiteboard? Malik asked quietly. Blake smirked. Oh, planning to teach us, Professor? But he gestured, and someone dragged a whiteboard to the center. Malik picked up a marker and began sketching. No hesitation, no fear. Just flow. He drew 2 lines, one labeled mechanical and the other software. Then he connected them with mismatched arrows. Your engine, Malik said softly, is speaking in a different language than your code. He tapped the first arrow. This is metric. Tapped the second. This is imperial. Engineers leaned forward. Vivian's eyes widened. A German vendor muttered, Mein Gott. Malik continued drawing. RPM curves, tolerance windows, harmonic drift. He pointed to the red spike on the engine's diagnostics log. At 14 minutes and 37 seconds, he explained, the mismatch hits a threshold the engine can't correct anymore. He pointed at the oscillating waveform on the screen. Mechanical rhythm is here. He tapped again. But the AI expects this. 2 patterns similar, but not the same. A faint wave of realization washed over the room. He picked up the paperclip again, pressed it to the engine casing, and tapped the whiteboard in sync. Vibration on the machine is metric pure, he said. Too precise for what your imperial-coded software thinks it's feeling? Silence deepened. A few engineers looked sick. Malik kept going. He traced the waveform into a steady peak. This engine wants to run at 3,400 RPM. That's where the natural harmony is. He lowered his voice. But your AI, Using inch-based logic is trying to force it into a slightly different rhythm. He drew a crooked arrow. That's why the AI overcorrects. That's why the temperature climbs. That's why it dies at the same moment every time. Vivian stepped closer, whispering. He's right. Blake's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected seriousness. He wanted a circus, but Malik wasn't performing. He was diagnosing. Okay, Malik said finally, turning to the crowd. You don't need new software. He pointed at the board. You need a translator. The room rippled with confusion. A what? Someone asked. Malik nodded, calm and certain. A way to let the engine keep its metric rhythm. While the AI thinks in inches, he put the marker down. Give me a small dampener ring, a few washers, a basic grommet, and 2 hex keys. An engineer whispered, Those cost like $10? Malik nodded. Then let's start with 10. The crowd leaned in. Blake leaned back, and the live stream exploded with, The kid is serious. This is real. Let Malik fix it. Malik stepped to the engine, softly, steadily, like he had stepped toward machines his entire life, and he whispered, Time to translate your heartbeat. Malik placed both hands on the engine, not to fix it, but to feel it. The metal vibrated like a nervous animal, its rhythm uneven, struggling, confused. He closed his eyes. Tap, 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 tap! The same mismatched pulse he'd heard with the paperclip. Now stronger, clearer, almost pleading. He opened the access panel with slow, steady movements. No rush, no fear, every motion deliberate, as if he already knew the engine was trying to speak. Behind him, engineers huddled in tight circles, whispering. Why's he touching the casing first? He's not following any diagnostic protocol. This is ridiculous. But the German vendor leaned closer, fascinated. This is how old-school mechanics diagnose harmonic drift, he murmured. My grandfather did this. Malik ran his fingers along the crank mount, then the piston sleeve, then the sensor bracket, pausing each time the vibration shifted. Finally, he pointed at the diagnostic screen. See that? A jagged red spike pulsed in a repeating cycle. That spike matches the vibration pattern exactly. It's not random. It's the machine trying to stabilize, but the code forces it off rhythm. He tapped the housing gently. Metric parts, imperial assumptions. A hush fell. He stepped back, eyes sharpening. This engine isn't broken, he said quietly. It's bilingual, and no one ever taught it how to translate. Then he turned to the crowd. Time for the deeper diagnosis. Malik wiped his palms on his jeans, stepped toward the whiteboard again, and the entire room followed him with their eyes. The engine hummed behind him, alive but unsettled, a creature trapped between 2 different rhythms. He drew a long vertical line. This, he said softly, is the engine's natural frequency. A smooth curve, steady, predictable. Then he drew a second line beside it, crooked, jagged. And this is what your AI thinks the frequency should be. He tapped the jagged line. It's wrong. Vivian stiffened. Define wrong. Malik didn't hesitate. Your mechanical design comes from Munich. German precision. Every piece built to tolerances so tight there's no room for drift. He pointed at the crankshaft blueprint an engineer had reluctantly handed him earlier. 7.63 millimeters. That's the diameter of the German crank. He grabbed a nearby tablet and pulled up the software. Calibration window. But your code assumes 3.450 inches. He circled the number. That converts to 87.63 millimeters? Yes. But the tolerance expectations are completely different. A senior engineer frowned. That shouldn't matter. Malik turned, stared him dead in the eyes. It does. He held up the digital caliper. Still set to metric. When the German parts shift by even 0.01 Millimeter, the system adapts instantly. But your software assumes American tolerance. Plus or minus 0.005 inches. He paused. That's 0.127 millimeters. A collective gasp moved through the engineers. That's over 100 times more wiggle room than the machine actually has, Malik continued. So the AI thinks the engine is sloppy, and it overcorrects. Again and again, forcing the machine to fight itself. He tapped the oscilloscope display, showing two waveforms drifting apart. The mismatch builds slowly, until exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds. He circled the moment the two curves collided. That's when mechanical harmony breaks, and the entire system panics. A murmur ran through the room. That's why it overheats, Malik said. That's why it locks. That's why it shuts down. Vivian stepped forward, voice barely above a whisper. You're describing harmonic resonance. Malik nodded. Harmonic resonance, forced into dissonance by bad translation. The German vendor's jaw tightened. Our parts meet perfect tolerance. The flaw is not on the mechanical side. I know, Malik said. You built a pure instrument. He gestured toward the software team. But they trained the conductor in the wrong language. The employee shifted, eyes opening, realization spreading like a slow, rising fire. Malik stepped back from the board, letting the silence breathe. Then he said the line that cracked the room open. You don't have a broken engine. He turned, pointing at the prototype. You have a misunderstood one. The room didn't explode all at once. It cracked, slowly. The first fracture came from Marcus, the MIT-trained lead engineer, who shoved through the crowd with his tablet raised like a shield. This is nonsense, he snapped. Harmonic drift doesn't work that way. We tested tolerance variance in week 2. Malik didn't look offended, just disappointed. You tested the variance your software expected, he said calmly. Not the variance the engine actually produced. Marcus scoffed. We ran full-spectrum analysis. Malik pointed at the blueprint still on the table. You ran American analysis. He tapped the crankshaft measurement, 87.63 millimeters. Tell me, Marcus, did you measure the German tolerances manually, or did you trust the conversion table in the code? Marcus froze. A single devastating silence answered Malik's question. Before anyone could speak, the German vendor stepped forward, his accent sharpening. Our components are machined to tolerances tighter than any American standard, he said firmly. If the boy's calculations are correct, then your entire calibration model is flawed. Another fracture. Vivian, the CTO, slowly removed her glasses. You're saying, she whispered, that all our diagnostic assumptions were wrong? Malik nodded. You were chasing ghosts. Because the numbers lied before the engine ever did. Then HR chimed in, voice trembling. But even if he's right, he can't perform modifications. Liability. The German vendor cut her off. We will sign responsibility waivers. Let him finish. Gasps broke across the room. Ava clutched her chest, overwhelmed. Malik remained still, grounded, steady. I don't want to break anything, he said softly. I just want the engine to stop fighting itself. All eyes turned to Blake, the CEO. He smirked, folding his arms. Fine. If the boy wants to embarrass himself on camera. He gestured to the live-stream drones circling above. Let him try. Malik nodded once, then turned back to the engine. He pressed his palm against the metal, feeling the pulse inside. It's close, he whispered. Then he looked at the engineers crowded around him. No more arguing. No more assumptions. His voice dropped lower. You've checked everything except the truth. He stepped toward the diagnostic bay. Now watch and learn how to listen. Malik knelt beside the engine, hands steady, not hesitating, not second-guessing, just listening. He opened a small drawer of spare parts, rifling through washers, rings, and grommets until he found the exact ones he needed. A $10 solution for a multi-million-dollar failure. He slid a thin rubber grommet beneath the mount, added a micro-stack of washers, then eased a tiny dampener ring into place. Each movement precise, calculated, almost musical. Vivian adjusted the polling interval on the calibration tablet, hands trembling. Malik tightened the final hex bolt with a soft click. He exhaled slowly. Then he stood, wiped his hands on his shirt, and stepped back from the engine. His eyes lifted. Calm. Certain. Start her, he said. A single command. And the room froze. The engine waited in silence, a metallic beast holding its breath. Vivian reached toward the ignition key with a trembling hand. Her fingers hovered, hesitated, then turned it. Click. A low rumble rolled across the room, deep and steady. Not strained, not choking, but alive. The vibration under the floor changed, smoother, calmer, balanced. Malik's eyes softened. There you are, he whispered. The RPM climbed slowly. 1,200, 2,000, 2,800, the zone where it always struggled. Employees leaned forward in dread, waiting for the familiar knock, the rattle, the dying whine, but none came. At 3,400 RPM, the engine settled into a perfect hum, the sound of harmony rediscovered. Then, the moment everyone was watching for, Vivian called out the timestamp, 10 minutes. Still green, still stable. Engineers clutched clipboards to their chests. The German vendor stared at the live metrics, lips parted in disbelief. 14 minutes, Vivian said, all eyes locked on the diagnostic screens. No spike, no overheating, no error code. The room held its breath. 1437, she said. Silence. Then, temperature stable, a technician gasped. No deviations. 0. The room erupted in a shocked chorus of whispers. Marcus, the MIT lead, covered his mouth with his hand, staring at the flawless temperature graph. How is this possible? He whispered. Because for the first time, the machine wasn't fighting itself. Malik stepped closer to the engine, placing his palm gently on the casing. The hum flowed into his hand like a heartbeat finding peace after years of chaos. Listen to that, he said softly. Not struggling, not panicking, just breathing. Blake Sterling's smirk wavered. He hadn't expected harmony. He'd expected flames. 20 minutes, Vivian announced, voice shaking now, still green, perfectly green. For the first time in 6 weeks, she stepped back. Tears gathering at the edges of her eyes. I can't believe it. The German vendor stood tall, adjusting his glasses. This, he declared, is the cleanest harmonic signature I have ever seen. Jamal's fix had delivered what Munich's own engineers had never achieved, but Malik wasn't done. He stepped to the diagnostic panel, scrolling through data streams with lightning-fast intuition. Torque ripple is down 30%, he said. Fuel efficiency up by almost 4. Engineers shook their heads in awe. Vivian whispered, he tuned a harmonic conflict we didn't even detect. The German vendor chuckled under his breath. Because he didn't search for the error in the code. He listened to the machine. Then Malik said something that silenced even the live stream comment feed. Bench test isn't enough, he said. He pointed at the prototype delivery robot waiting near the far wall. Its lights off. Its hydraulics cold. We make it carry weight. Move. Climb. Vivian's eyes widened. You want a full operational test? Malik nodded. If you want the truth, you never stop at half measures. He stepped away from the engine. Let's see if she can work. Not just run, the crowd parted. Cameras repositioned. Executives leaned forward, and for the first time, Blake Sterling looked afraid. The boardroom transformed into a battlefield of tension as Malik stepped toward the dormant delivery robot. Its metal frame gleamed under the overhead lights, a silent giant waiting for judgment. Vivian swallowed hard. This is it. The final test. Technicians scrambled, loading the robot's cargo compartment with weighted crates. 30 pounds, 50, 75. Every click of the latch echoed like a countdown. Blake tried to regain control of the room. This is unnecessary, he barked. Bench validation is more than enough. but the German vendor cut him off with a single raised hand. "No," he said firmly. "We test in reality, not in theory." Blake's jaw tightened as he watched his authority crumble in front of his own investors. Vivian activated the robot. Its eyes lit up in a soft blue glow. Hydraulics hissed. The machine shifted its weight, a low rumble of power awakening. The crowd leaned forward. "Route it to the mezzanine," Malik instructed. Gasps rippled through the room. That's a ramp incline of 27 degrees, Marcus stammered. "Even when the engine worked, the robot couldn't climb that without shutting down." Malik didn't blink. "Exactly." Vivian uploaded the route. The robot turned toward the ramp, each step heavy, deliberate. A metallic heartbeat echoing across the polished floor. 10 feet. 20. 30. The incline began. The engine didn't choke, didn't hesitate, didn't even drop below optimal RPM. Instead, it climbed. Smoothly, powerfully, relentlessly. The crowd erupted in disbelief as the robot reached the mezzanine landing, rotated flawlessly, and descended with computer-perfect precision. By the time it rolled to a stop beside Malik, silence had shattered into stunned applause. Vivian covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Marcus sank into a chair, eyes wide. Even the German vendor whispered, "A marvel!" Blake tried to speak, but his voice cracked, and that's when Malik reached into his pocket, pulling out a small item that caused a ripple through the room. A simple business card, white, clean, unimaginable in its implication. He flicked it lightly with his thumb. "Funny thing," Malik said quietly. "I've already been offered positions by 3 of your competitors." Blake's face drained of color. The crescendo had begun. The room vibrated with a new kind of tension. Not fear anymore, but anticipation. Malik slid the business card back into his pocket with deliberate calm, the kind of calm that made powerful men nervous. Blake's eyes twitched, uncertain whether to lash out or retreat. "Don't play games!" Blake snapped, though his voice betrayed him. "You're bluffing." Malik tilted his head. "Am I?" The question lingered like smoke. Vivian stepped forward, emboldened. "For weeks we begged you to review the mechanical data. We asked for funding. We asked for time. You ignored every single warning." The German vendor, still processing the flawless robot climb, turned toward Blake with cold scrutiny. "Your leadership," he said stiffly, "appears inconsistent." That single word, inconsistent, hit Blake harder than any insult. Investors feared inconsistency the way sailors feared storms. Blake's face reddened. "We don't need to discuss leadership. We need to discuss the truth," Malik interrupted softly. A murmur swept through the room. Vivian opened a folder, one she had guarded for weeks, filled with timestamps, emails, and internal reports. She placed it on the table like evidence. "Every failure of this engine points to negligence," she said. That negligence wasn't technical. It was managerial. Blake froze. "You're accusing me?" "No," Malik replied. "We're letting your own decisions speak." Vivian tapped the top page. 6 rejected proposals for tolerance audits. 4 canceled diagnostic reviews. 12 ignored warnings about calibration mismatches. And the worst, you ordered us to stop investigating mechanical causes because it made the company look incompetent. Gasps scattered through the crowd. Blake tried to form a rebuttal, but words failed him. The avalanche had begun. The German vendor adjusted his glasses, scanning the documents. "This is troubling. Your management choices directly interfered with technical accuracy." Dr. Rodriguez crossed her arms, her tone surgical. "In my 40 years of engineering, I've never seen a leader suppress critical data this recklessly." Blake trembled with anger. "You're all turning against me because of him?" He pointed at Malik like an accusation, like a threat. Malik didn't flinch. "No," he said. "They're turning because of what you did." Blake took a step forward, but the boardroom security subtly shifted. Ready. And then Malik reached for the second item in his pocket. Not a business card, a flash drive. He placed it on the table. "It's time," Malik said quietly, "for everyone to hear what you never wanted them to hear." The room inhaled as one. The avalanche was no longer coming. It was here. No one moved as the tiny flash drive sat on the polished table, glowing beneath the overhead lights like a fuse waiting to be lit. Blake stared at it, his breath shallow, the realization dawning that whatever came next would be irreversible. Malik didn't rush. He let the silence thicken, heavy, suffocating, until every eye in the room locked onto him. Vivian whispered, "Play it." Malik inserted the drive into the boardroom monitor. A beat, then another. The screen blinked awake, static. A timestamp, then voices. Blake's voice, sharp. "Impatient? Unmistakably arrogant? I don't care what the engineering team thinks. They'll fix what I tell them to fix. Our investors don't need to know the truth. They need confidence, not technical excuses." Murmurs erupted immediately. Blake paled. Another clip. This time his voice was colder. "If the engine keeps failing, hide the reports. We'll blame calibration issues or software delays. Just make sure no one outside the executive circle sees the real numbers." A gasp cut through the room. Vivian closed her eyes. Those words had haunted her privately, but hearing them echo through the boardroom felt like a cleansing wildfire burning through the last remnants of Blake's facade. Clip 3. Blake again, laughing. "If anyone asks, pin it on the maintenance team. They're disposable. Nobody takes them seriously anyway." All heads turned slowly toward Malik. The room shifted, from shock to horror to anger. Blake lunged toward the monitor. "Turn it off!" "That recording is taken out of context. You manipulated—" "No," Malik said firmly. "There's more." Clip 4. This one was longer, more damning. Blake speaking during a private call. Confident no one was listening. "I'm not wasting resources on tolerance mismatches. The Germans won't know the difference, and our internal staff is too scared to question me. We'll fake the diagnostic logs if we have to. They'll never see the real failures." The German vendor stiffened. "You falsified engineering data?" Blake's voice cracked. "That was just hypothetical." Dr. Rodriguez slammed her notebook shut. "No, that was intentional misconduct." Clip 5 began automatically, and this time the room fell completely silent. It was Blake again, the one line that would end everything. "If that janitor speaks up again, just fire him. People like him don't belong anywhere near our engineering teams." The venom in his tone was undeniable. A slow, collective exhale swept across the room like a wave. Malik stepped forward. "I didn't record those clips," he said. "You did." He tapped the screen. "Your Office cloud backup syncs automatically. You never disabled meeting transcription mode." The truth hit the room with violent clarity. Blake's knees buckled. "You think this will save you?" he choked. "You're nobody. A janitor. You think the board will believe you over—" A deep voice cut him off. It belonged to the chairman of the board, who had been silent until now. "Actually," the chairman said, rising slowly, "I don't think we need to take sides." He faced Blake with cold precision. "The engineering team warned you. The investors warned you. Your own recordings confirm your deceit. But do you know the worst part?" He gestured to Malik. "You dismissed the one person who actually solved the crisis." A ripple of recognition spread across the room. Malik wasn't just the hero of the day. He was the person who had exposed the company's greatest lie. The chairman inhaled. "Deeply, Mr. Blake," he said softly. "You are hereby removed from your position as CEO, effective immediately." Blake staggered backward like he'd been struck. Vivian gasped. Marcus exhaled in disbelief. The Germans nodded, satisfied, but the room wasn't done shifting, because the chairman wasn't finished. He turned to Malik, and as of this moment, "The board has reached a unanimous decision." The entire room leaned forward. "Malik Daniels, you will assume interim executive leadership, effective today." The impact was seismic. The cabin didn't just react, it erupted. For a full 10 seconds, No one breathed. Then the room erupted, not in chaos, but in a stunned, rising swell of voices as reality crashed through every corner of the boardroom. Malik stood perfectly still, not triumphant, not overwhelmed, just steady, grounded, like someone who had waited his entire life for a moment nobody else believed he would ever reach. The chairman raised a hand, and slowly the room quieted again. "We don't make decisions lightly," he said, scanning the table, then the German delegation, then the engineering team still crowded near the walls. But the truth is undeniable. One man solved what dozens of specialists could not, while our own CEO chose cover-ups over competency. He looked directly at Blake. "You gambled with our contracts, our reputation, and the livelihoods of every employee in this building." Blake swallowed hard, pride collapsing into fear. The chairman continued. "Effective immediately, Blake Turner is placed under internal investigation. Access revoked, credentials suspended, legal review underway." Security stepped forward. Blake backed up, shaking his head. "You can't, you're making a mistake. He isn't qualified to lead anything." His voice cracked. Desperate, hollow, but no one rushed to defend him. Not one engineer, not one administrator, not even HR. He stood alone. Security escorted him out as the live stream captured every second, the comment section exploding with the digital equivalent of thunder. Silence returned, a cleaner, freer silence. Dr. Rodriguez stepped forward next, her tone firm, authoritative. "We move forward with correction, not ego. Effective today, 3 immediate policy changes. All employee insights, regardless of role, must be documented and reviewed weekly. Engineering audit logs cannot be altered without cross-approval from at least 2 departments. Any future design failures require open listening panels, where titles do not outweigh truth." She placed her hand on the conference table. "And I would like Malik to lead those panels." A wave of murmurs spread across the room, supportive, enthusiastic. The chairman nodded. "So noted." Then he turned toward Malik again. "You deserve clarity," he said gently. "This interim leadership role isn't symbolic. We need someone with real judgment, someone who doesn't cut corners or hide the truth." He paused. "We saw that in you before we saw it in anyone else." Malik finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying an unshakable weight. "I'm honored, but I need to make one thing clear." Everyone leaned in. "I don't want a title that sits in an office. I want a role that protects the integrity of the work. I want every technician, every cleaner, every engineer to be heard, because if someone had listened 6 weeks ago, none of this damage would have happened." Vivian wiped a tear from her eye. For the first time, she felt hope instead of dread. The chairman smiled softly. "Then you've already proven why you're the right choice." He motioned to the German delegation. "Klaus, your thoughts?" Klaus Miller stood, straightening the sleeves of his immaculate suit. "In Germany," he began, "leadership is not given. It is demonstrated. Today, Herr Daniels demonstrated innovation, honesty, and respect for the machinery and the people working around it." He inclined his head toward Malik. "To us, he is the engineer who listens." Elena Rodriguez nodded firmly. "The future of this company depends on that kind of leadership." Marcus, humbled but sincere, stepped closer. "If you'll allow it, I'd like to learn from you," he said. "And I know my entire team feels the same." Other engineers nodded. Some embarrassed, some inspired, all changed. The chairman addressed the room. "Ground teams will begin full recalibration of all engine units using Malik's harmonics protocol." He turned to Malik again. "You'll oversee it." Malik nodded slowly. "Then we do it together." A spark lit across the room. Pride, relief, unity. It was the first time in months that the company felt like a team. Dr. Rodriguez added one final instruction. Make no mistake. Today marks the beginning of a new standard, one built on listening, truth, and respect for skill wherever it lives. As the crowd filed out, energized, murmuring, uplifted, Malik lingered by the window. The courtyard lights reflected against the glass, casting his silhouette across a company he had once been invisible in. Not anymore. Not ever again, because the ground had shifted. Policies had changed, and a new kind of leadership had taken root, one built from the bottom up, exactly where real strength is born. The story didn't stay inside the building. It exploded. By the next morning, the footage of Malik fixing the impossible engine had spread across every major platform like wildfire. Clips of him placing his hands on the machine, listening, correcting, installing a simple dampener were stitched into thousands of reaction videos. One caption read, "The janitor who saved a company." Another, "Genius doesn't need permission." Within hours, hashtags surged across the internet. Listen to talent. Malik Daniels, Engineering Justice. Truth Over Title's news anchors replayed the moment the engine roared to life with perfect harmony. Analysts argued on morning shows about corporate bias, overlooked workers, and hidden brilliance in America's workforce. Tech blogs wrote think pieces titled, "The Day a Maintenance Worker Out-Engineered Silicon Valley." LinkedIn lit up like a storm. Employees nationwide shared their own stories of being dismissed or underestimated. Malik had become a symbol, an unexpected one, for everyone who had been told they weren't qualified enough to speak. But inside Tech Vanguard, the reaction was even more seismic. Recruitment emails quadrupled. Talented engineers from around the world applied after seeing the new culture shift. Investors who had once hesitated now sent congratulatory messages to the board. And the German delegation? They extended their stay. Klaus Müller recorded a public statement outside the building. "Great innovation demands humility. We witnessed humility from the one man no one expected, and arrogance from those entrusted with leadership. Our partnership now stands stronger than ever." That statement alone boosted Tech Vanguard's market value by nearly 9%. But it was the internal emails, released overnight, that sent shockwaves across the company. Hundreds of employees wrote to Malik directly, not asking for favors, not pleading for recommendations, but thanking him for giving them courage, for proving that titles don't define intelligence, for standing tall in a room designed to crush him. The board took notice of the public sentiment and the cultural momentum. They issued a company-wide memo. Tech Vanguard commits to rebuilding a culture where every voice is valued. Today marks a new era. And at the bottom of that memo, interim harmonics director Malik Daniels. Not janitor, not consultant, director. When Malik arrived Thursday morning, he didn't walk into the building unseen or ignored. People stood, people applauded. Some even clapped him on the back with pride, whispering, "We're with you now." Even departments he had never interacted with were waiting in the lobby just to shake his hand. Vivian met him near the elevator, her eyes bright. "You didn't just fix the engine," she said. "You fixed the way people think." Dr. Rodriguez approached moments later. "Fame is loud, Malik," she said gently. "But integrity is steady. Stay steady." He nodded, but he didn't realize, not yet, that the next wave was already forming, because story after story of overlooked workers began surfacing. Journalists requested interviews. Documentary filmmakers sent inquiries. And one headline, rising across news sites like a beacon, read, "The Hidden Genius Who Changed Corporate America in One Afternoon." The world wasn't just watching anymore, it was listening. The ripple didn't stop at Tech Vanguard. It tore through the entire industry. Within 48 hours, every major tech outlet had dissected the footage frame by frame. Engineers debated Malik's harmonic analysis on forums usually reserved for PhDs. Executives whispered about the Daniels effect, the sudden fear that hidden geniuses inside their own companies might reveal the cracks in their leadership. But the one who felt the quake most violently was Blake Turner. It began quietly. An email here, a legal inquiry there, a board request for documentation he should have filed months ago. Then 2 journalists, both Pulitzer finalists, started asking pointed questions. Mr. Turner, did you deliberately suppress calibration reports? Is it true you blocked engineering audits to hide manufacturing errors? Sources claim you ignored employee warnings for 6 weeks. Is that accurate? Blake slammed his laptop shut each time, palms sweating. The downfall he once believed impossible had begun. The first formal strike came from the board's internal investigation team. They laid out everything in a thick binder. Emails he thought were deleted, messages he thought were private, orders he thought would never be traced back. Every insult, every dismissal, every calculated threat, and worst of all, the recorded meeting where he'd said, "I don't care if the engine fails, make it look fixed long enough to get the Germans to sign." Legal stopped breathing when they heard that. By Monday morning, Blake's office badge blinked red instead of green. Suspended. Then came the vendors. The Germans filed a preliminary ethics violation report with their regulatory board. They submitted a formal complaint, unethical misrepresentation of technical readiness. That alone was enough to freeze millions in international funding. Next, the American Automotive Engineering Council announced a full review of Tech Vanguard's compliance history under Blake's leadership, and it didn't stop there. Pasty. Employees, people Blake had fired, silenced, humiliated, began speaking out. He shut down my design because it made him look uninformed. I was told my reports were too detailed because he didn't understand them. He laughed when I suggested double-checking tolerance specs. He threatened to blacklist me from the industry if I disagreed publicly. Every story piled onto the previous one until a picture formed. A picture of a man who had climbed to the top by cutting down anyone smarter, humbler, or more capable than he was. By Wednesday, Blake's name trended nationally, not as a CEO, but as a cautionary tale. The lawsuit notifications arrived Thursday morning. 3 separate law firms issued letters of intent. Wrongful termination, hostile workplace environment, engineering fraud, negligence resulting in contractual damage, and then the worst. The German delegation's legal department prepared a claim for intentional deception during technical evaluation. That alone carried penalties in the tens of millions. Blake read each notice with shaking hands, his world collapsing in printed paragraphs. Then came the moment that shattered whatever was left of his pride. He received a call from his own lawyer. "Blake, you need to understand something. You're not the victim here. You're the liability." It was the first time Blake Turner realized nobody was coming to save him. Not the board. Not his allies. Not the system he thought he controlled. Meanwhile, Malik's world was transforming in the opposite direction. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't celebrating. He was simply adjusting. HR offered him a temporary driver because paparazzi waited outside his apartment. Executives offered him private offices. He declined them all. "I'm fine," he kept saying. "I just want to work." He spent most of his time in the lab, refining harmonic protocols, training engineering teams, rewriting calibration systems with patience and clarity. And something remarkable happened. People listened. Really listened. When Malik spoke, rooms quieted. When he explained a theory, heads nodded. When he asked for testing, no one sought shortcuts. It was a culture shift. Swift, sweeping, overdue. Vivian felt it too. "You know," she told him one afternoon, You didn't just expose Blake, you exposed the fear that keeps every brilliant person silent. Malik smiled softly. I don't want people to be scared. I want them to speak. They will, she said. Because you did. But not everyone embraced the new era. Some of Blake's former supporters clung to old habits, questioning Malik's lack of formal degrees, whispering doubts, waiting for him to fail. Malik heard the whispers. He just didn't feed them. Instead, he built systems that didn't need trust, only transparency, audit trails, cross-department review boards, open engineering forums, anonymous idea submissions. He created the environment he wished he had when he was invisible. And slowly, resistance faded. Even the skeptics began to admire him, not because he was a hero, but because he made everything work. The final blow to Blake came on a rainy Friday morning. He showed up at corporate headquarters unannounced, wearing a suit that looked like it belonged to a different life. He pushed through reporters and marched inside. Security blocked him at the turnstile. I'm here to speak to the board. Sir, your access is revoked. You don't understand, Blake hissed. That engine, that project, that company, I built all of it. I deserved to be in that room, but he didn't. He no longer had a room. He no longer had a voice. He no longer had a title. And as he stood there, soaking wet, shaking with anger, he saw something that crushed him more than any investigation ever could. Employees walked past him. Without recognition, without fear, without respect. He wasn't the center of the company anymore. He wasn't even a footnote. He was just a man. Undone by the very arrogance that once lifted him. As Blake stepped back into the rain, alone, disgraced, unraveled, Malik remained inside the building. Steady, focused, and already shaping the next chapter of the company's future. The fall of one man had revealed the rising of another. And the industry was watching, listening, learning, because this wasn't just corporate drama anymore. It was a new blueprint for leadership. Blueprint written by the man no one ever bothered to see. The courtroom smelled of old wood and older judgments. The kind that had shaped careers, crushed egos, and rewritten futures. Today it would do all three. Blake Turner sat at the defendant's table, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were bone white. He looked smaller than he ever had inside a boardroom. His tailored confidence replaced by a trembling uncertainty that even his expensive lawyer couldn't hide behind polished arguments. Cameras lined the back wall. Journalists whispered like vultures circling a fading flame. But Malik, he sat quietly in the second row, not triumphant, not bitter, just present. A witness to the final chapter of a story he never asked to be part of. The judge entered. Court is now in session. Everyone rose. Blake did too. Slowly, stiffly, like a man rising not out of respect, but out of fear of sinking any further. The judge settled into their seat and opened a thick file. Mr. Turner, this case is not simply about technical negligence. It is about leadership misconduct, fraud through omission, suppression of critical safety data, and the reckless endangerment of both corporate partners and employees. Whispers rippled across the courtroom. Blake's jaw tightened. The judge continued. For 6 weeks, your ego cost this company millions. Your decisions endangered international partnerships, put hundreds of jobs at risk, and deliberately silenced those who sought to prevent disaster. But the most troubling element is not your incompetence, but your intent. They held up a printed email, one Blake thought he had deleted. Make it look fixed long enough for them to sign. Blake closed his eyes. His lawyer placed a steadying hand on his arm. But it did nothing. The judge leaned forward. This court cannot ignore leadership that weaponizes deception. They looked toward Malik. And it cannot ignore those who acted with integrity in the face of disrespect. Malik didn't nod. He didn't smile. He simply listened, the way he listened to engines, to vibrations, to truth. The judge returned their gaze to Blake. For the charges presented, corporate fraud, obstruction of internal investigation, and breach of fiduciary duty. This court sentences you to 18 months of restricted corporate activity, mandatory ethics rehabilitation, complete forfeiture of your executive severance, and a federal oversight flag placed on all future leadership roles. Gasps echoed around the room. Blake broke. "I'm not a criminal," he whispered. The judge replied softly, but without mercy, "No, you're not. But you are a cautionary tale." The gavel struck. This time, it didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like closure. 1 year later, the sun rose differently over Tech Vanguard now, warmer, brighter, grounded in purpose instead of panic. Where once the courtyard hosted silent prototype failures, it now buzzed with international engineers exchanging ideas in half a dozen languages. The new Harmonic Innovation Wing. A sleek glass structure funded jointly by the board and the German investors stood tall beside the main building. A brushed metal plaque read, "In honor of those who listen." Dedicated to Malik Daniels inside, workbenches stretched across an arena filled with living creativity. Students, junior techs, veteran engineers, even custodial staff all collaborating on next-generation harmonic engines. Because Malik insisted the space remain open to everyone. When people feel invisible, he said, innovation dies. Now, innovation lived everywhere. Malik's office, if you could call it that, barely resembled a CEO suite. It was a workshop disguised as a workspace. Tool racks on the walls, whiteboards filled with equations, engine parts arranged like musical instruments waiting to be played. The only traditional item on his desk was a photograph, an old one, of his mother, his grandfather, and a younger version of him smiling beneath the sun. Vivian knocked gently before entering. "You ready for your keynote?" she asked softly. Malik shrugged, tightening one final bolt on the new microharmonic prototype. "Keynotes make me nervous." Vivian laughed. "You faced a room of executives who wanted you fired. You faced a company that ignored you. You faced a CEO who mocked you. You faced an engine that the world said was impossible. I think you'll survive a keynote," Malik smiled. A real smile. Yeah. Maybe. The world had changed, too. Universities referenced the Daniels harmonic principle in engineering textbooks. A TED-style documentary chronicled the viral moment when a maintenance worker redefined mechanical harmony. A scholarship fund was launched in his name for overlooked students with extraordinary potential. Engine manufacturers across Europe adopted his calibration protocols. American startups invited him for consultations. German news outlets called him der Mann, der dem Motor zuhörte, the man who listened to the engine. Everywhere he went, people recognized him, but nothing changed him. He still rode the bus sometimes. He still ate lunch with technicians. He still corrected rookie mistakes with kindness instead of arrogance. He still listened more than he spoke, because his grandfather taught him, "Engines don't lie, boy." People do. So listen twice before you speak once. Malik lived by that. The tech world marveled at him. His co-workers respected him, and the company he once cleaned for now built its future around his voice. The Leadership Summit. The auditorium was full. International CEOs, engineering directors, students, analysts, journalists. A massive screen behind Malik displayed the title of his keynote, Harmony in Innovation, Listening Beyond the Noise. He approached the podium quietly, no dramatic entrance. No practiced swagger, just calm presence. He adjusted the mic. "When I was younger," he began, "my grandfather told me that every engine has a heartbeat. And if you learn to feel that heartbeat, you can fix anything." Pause. But he taught me something else too. He scanned the room, meeting eyes, building connection. People have heartbeats too, and most workplaces never bother to listen. Murmurs of agreement filled the hall. He continued. The problem at Tech Vanguard wasn't a broken engine. It was a broken culture. A culture where brilliant voices were ignored. where job titles mattered more than talent, where fear drowned out creativity. Silence. A heavy, understanding silence. And the truth is, he exhaled softly, I was part of that silence too. I didn't speak. I didn't push. I didn't fight. I waited for someone to ask what I thought before realizing real value doesn't wait. Real value offers. He stepped back. And when you finally speak, when you finally listen, everything changes. Applause thundered across the hall, but Malik raised a hand, softly, gently. There's one more thing. The room stilled. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a prodigy. I was just a man doing the thing I was taught to do. Listen, he smiled. And maybe, if we all listened better, to engines, to people, to possibility, the world might run a little smoother. The applause this time didn't thunder. It rose like a wave. Steady, powerful, undeniable. If this story reminded you that brilliance can come from anywhere, if it made you rethink the quiet people you walk past every day, if it showed you that talent doesn't need a title, then join our community. Share your thoughts. Share your experiences. Share your story. Because your voice, your heartbeat, might inspire the next transformation. Subscribe, like, and comment below. Your story could become the next one we tell. And before you leave, there's a tiny detail hidden at minute 432 in this story, a clue about who Malik truly became. Watch again, and tell us what you noticed.